And now, to kick it off, so our first session today will be with John Steinberg, who's founder and CEO of Cheddar. Cheddar, for those who aren't familiar, hopefully, and particularly on behalf of John, hopefully most of you, if not all of you, are. It would say, sort of alternative, millennial-focused news service. Business news, other news, on site at the White House, on site at the New York Stock Exchange, other locations, really innovating in pretty amazing ways and very, very cross-platform. So I had to write down the list here, but on Sling, Amazon, Philo, Twitch, Comcast or Xfinity X1, and now actually, I guess just 2 days ago, I think, announced working with Magic Leap, so creating a very interesting mixed reality experience around news. So John also has a background from Daily Mail, BuzzFeed, Google, so a wealth of experience here to share, and we'll start with him and talking about how to succeed in a cross-platform world. Please welcome John.
Probably going to block it if I
do. We have a video? Yeah, I'll step aside.
I'll step aside too. Room.
I know, it's great.
I like that the conclusion of the advertising survey of the Advertising Trade Organization is that people just fucking love advertising.
Well, half of them do, anyway.
80%.
2/3.
Right? Could you imagine? Could you imagine if it came out the other way?
That's a fair point. We all have work to do.
No, look, I took pictures. I'll be sticking those in my next deck.
That's great. Yeah. Exactly. Backing up, what really motivated you to start Cheddar?
Well, it's funny. I went to this. One of my investors had a former monk speak to the group before we did the regular stuff, and it was a guy who had spent 8 years in a monastery, and then he had decided he wanted to help people discover their life's purpose. So when you ask me that. And it can't be taking care of your children and your loved ones. It has to be something which is self-generated. This was the rule that he said. So why did I do this? I love creating things from scratch. That's my life's purpose. I love creating things from scratch. And when we go live on Sling or Hulu or YouTube TV or one of these new systems and we're next to CNN, that to me is the biggest rush in life. So that's why I do it. I did a lot of CNBC while I was at BuzzFeed because it was a great way to meet CMOs and to pick off advertisers. And I found out very quickly that they had a tiny audience and they did $1 billion a year in revenue. And I said, that's a business I want to be in. And I also thought that one of two things would happen, which would be this live news would just go away because, CNN, CNBC, Fox, their audiences are all in the mid to late 60s, to your point about soft landing.
I used to work at Yahoo. I'm familiar with your audience dying. Good.
So the bet was that would be reinvented and these OTT platforms would be a thing and we would be there. And it was a long odds bet 3 years ago because when I started the company in January of 2016, the only OTT system in the United States was Sling. No Hulu Live, no YouTube TV, no DirecTV Now, no Roku channel. So that was the bet.
Excellent. We've already covered, I think, a lot of the different platforms that Cheddar is available on. What's the number one platform?
Well, all that matters to me is the paid OTT television systems. So for us to be the best partner in the world to Sling, Hulu, YouTube TV, Fubo, Philo, DirecTV Now, Comcast X1, and the like, my bet is that some or all of these systems will be successful in the future. Everybody will get Netflix because Netflix is the best entertainment deal on planet Earth for every single person on Earth, as the economics are right now. And then everybody will companion that potentially with a Freeview news system, like a Roku channel, which we're on, or a paid system, like a Sling or a Hulu or a DirecTV Now.
Got it. Okay. Do you find that the audience size and how different, I guess, is audience size, or maybe even more the mix of the audience across different devices and platforms?
I mean, we get unbelievably little data from the platforms, and understandably so. These are publicly traded companies. They don't want people backing out their sub numbers. We're largely restricted in what we can share. And Nielsen and ComScore are nowheresville. I mean, they're both barely functional companies. And on the social side, that data is not that useful either, because what Facebook tells you works is just what the algorithm is favoring in that particular day. So I've built this entire company on the premise of we're going to make the content that we want to make, and it's going to be as big as it can be, and it's going to be as big as it can be.
How much do you, maybe one last question on the different devices and platforms, how much do you customize or change the content and the ads by platform?
So we don't on the OTT. So, and in fact, that's part of the rules, which is that we are MFN. We can't give a different, we have 2 live news channels now. We can't give a different Cheddar news channel or Cheddar business channel to Sling than what we give to YouTube TV. That would, and also it would be jarring to the consumer. The consumer needs to know that CNN is CNN and Cheddar is Cheddar, right? On Facebook, we make the only kind of content that works on Facebook and Instagram, which is gadget stuff. No substantive content works on Facebook, period, end of sentence. And on Twitter, we are able to put newsworthy short clips because we know that that audience is an intelligentsia kind of audience that's interested in craves news. So, form sort of follows function. On Snap, we do 10 million people a month on Snap now, and we actually do what I would classify as substantive content there. They love the esports news. Anything we put in with Ninja does unbelievably well. And they love cannabis content. Anything we do about business of cannabis works pretty well.
It's a good combination too, right?
Yeah, but I don't really yuck people's yums. I think that, look, I think Ninja's the coolest guy on earth. I think he's the biggest celebrity in the world. He's all my son wants to talk about. And I think that the cannabis stuff is a tidal wave in terms of culture, a tidal wave in terms of the business story of it. I mean, we were at a street festival. We went to the Mickey Mouse exhibit. Has anyone been to that Mickey Mouse art exhibit? It was very short. I thought it was a little bit of a ripoff, to be honest. And then afterwards, we went to the Standard, and they had this outdoor market, and there was like 10 shops there, and 4 of them were selling CBD stuff. I have CBD soap in my shower this morning. I bathed with CBD soap. It's incredible.
The Mickey Mouse shaped CBD soap. Yeah, that's a good.
I mean,
Disney would not
I'm
like
sure.
that.
I mean, it's a matter of time before there's CBD in Disney World.
Yeah.
My wife said to me,
there
"What's
is
the
already,
difference?"
I'm sure,
My wife said to me, "What's the difference between CBD and marijuana?" I said, "You know what? Nobody knows."
That's great. Okay, stepping back. As you've evolved Cheddar, what are some of the biggest challenges, maybe particularly on the technical side, but also, if you like, on the business side that you faced?
Well, I guess what would be most interesting to this audience is building what we built with the control rooms and the studios, which is sort of a capital miracle. We did the whole thing for $5 million. Everything you saw there was $5 million in CapEx, undepreciated. But what I often say to people is it's like knitting together the best technology of 2018 with the best TV technology that 1987 had to offer, right? We're using products and software standards that, no modern technology executive has ever heard of, right? Ross expression, I mean, that's who we use for graphic serving. EMPS. I mean, this stuff is arcane. So that's been challenging, but it's good because it's created a moat. The other problem is the measurement thing is a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And the 2 companies, they're just not deserving of our business. I mean, they really aren't, ComScore just now filed their financials from 2015. So the #1 internet rating agency can't even file earnings with the SEC. I mean, that's not a good look, right? I mean, how good are they at measuring our stuff, right? So they can't measure any of this stuff. And Nielsen can't measure any of this stuff. Nielsen is like a reverse Blimpie. Blimpie, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Nielsen is like, why don't you pay me today for something that I may deliver in the future? Like that's their view of this stuff. And the problem is, if what I've said to them is, if you can measure me on all of these platforms and do it correctly, because I'm doing it incorrectly and coming out with a wrong number is terrifying to me. I'm not worried they're going to say we're small. I know we're small. We're Tesla. I get it. You know, CNBC ships more cars in a week than we ship in a year. Fine. Mine's electric and it self-drives. So I'm not afraid of them saying we're small because I want that currency. The problem is they'll get it wrong. That's the first thing. The second thing is I can't just cut them a check for a couple $100,000 and start getting numbers. It's, well, you got to integrate it in Sling this way, and you got to do this thing on mobile, and we don't catch that thing, and we're going to do this thing that way. That doesn't work for me, you know? I have 2 Ivy League degrees. I can't figure out what they do. Nobody in this room can figure out what they do. So that's not viable. So that has been the most challenging.
Flipping it around to what has worked, what sort? I mean, you already touched on a couple of tools, but maybe more from the ad industry, kind of the core of the ad industry. Are there things that have worked for you, sort of off the shelf?
No, nothing is working in the ad industry. Nothing is working in the ad industry. We'll do $30 million in top line this year, all brand direct. The media agencies have been no help whatsoever. The renewal rate has been near 80 to 90%. The media agencies have been no help. Why? Because we do a custom thing. I get that it's hard, but you know, their future can't just be buying Facebook and Google all day. Like that's not a business, and that's the reason why their stocks are where their stocks are at, and their clients are all increasingly dissatisfied, right? Look, it's one of two things. All of our financial service clients are either foolish for working with us and renewing, okay, despite the enormous sophistication of these companies, or the media agencies are wrong for being so hard to engage with. And look, I built BuzzFeed working with the media agencies. The problem is right now, they're just not leaning into doing new things. Now, they'll tell you that it's the client's fault, and the clients have compressed their margins so much that they can't do good work. That's what they'll tell you, right? Which is kind of crazy. So we don't have the wind at our back in the agency infrastructure. We don't have the wind at our back in terms of measurement. And we don't have the wind at our back in terms of the kind of ad serving that goes on in terms of dynamic ad insertion on these platforms. What do we have at our back? The product is great. It's being delivered the way consumers want it to be. We don't charge a sub fee, so we're getting put into all these next generation systems. We did a non-scalable ad product at BuzzFeed, the native advertising thing. It's a great product that works with significant brand lift that we can measure using the same third-party methodology CNBC uses, this firm Cogent MSI. And so it's been really hard. It's been really hard. It's been a lot of wind in our face. But ultimately, if you have a great product that consumers want, you can make it work.
So what else have you done in the direct brand relationships to make that effective, to help it scale?
So what we've done is we contact the people at the brand that have a responsibility for crossing the chasm for these companies. If it's somebody who's near retirement age at a Fortune 500 company, they're just going to buy TV and then drop the mic and be done. If it's someone whose job is to port the brand into the new world, we show them what we're doing. We show them the data. We map out with them all the different opportunities around sponsored segments or sponsored shows, which, by the way, is an existing thing that all the cable networks do. CNBC does Options Action, sponsored by TD Ameritrade. American Express sponsors a business show on MSNBC that runs Saturday morning. So we took something that was small and being done as like an amuse-bouche for these cable companies, and we made it the main course. And then luckily, CNBC had moved off of Nielsen and hired this firm Cogent MSI. They call 4,000 people for us every 6 weeks. And they ask them questions about viewership, and they ask them questions about the brands. And then also, we clip out a portion of the live airing content because the measurement around our live viewership is so squishy. And we put guaranteed paid views against it. So if you spend $125,000 to $150,000 a month with us, which is what all of our advertisers do, we have only multi-million-dollar advertisers. We did the 30 this year with like 18 brands. We clip out your segment. We tell you, don't even worry about the live viewership. We're going to put 1 million views over this period in paid targeted media, handshaking you on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And then that's been a very palatable solution. Creative, live viewership, and guaranteed views all baked into one solution.
Sort of related to that, and maybe a form of native ad is host-read ads.
Yes.
How has that worked for you?
Well, it's even bigger than host-read ads. It's more like with Ally Bank, we do a personal finance show. With TradeStation, we do a trading show. We just built a tiny house for Residio, which is the spin-out of Honeywell, and now we do a home technology show that aired for the last time last night. Logitech is our esports news coverage, which is front-paged on Twitch 3 hours a week. We use the keyboards, we use the devices. So it's a full 360-degree integration, really.
Okay. And maybe in some sense the opposite of sponsored shows and kind of native inserted ads. What have you done with interactive ads and really experimenting with formats, especially across different platforms, mobile, of course, in particular?
I mean, not that much. I mean, mostly because we're beholden to the ad standards that exist on the platforms that we're on. I can't, there's no interactivity on Sling or Hulu or YouTube TV. So we'll take advantage of whatever, and we are doing DAI. We are running dynamic ad insertion right now on Sling. They're the furthest along. So we take advantage of whatever, whatever's available.
Got it. And maybe last question, what do you see as the role of standards? Some of the work that Tech Lab does certainly fine to say you don't use them, you don't see a role, but how do you see it evolving?
My life would be so much easier if there were standards, right? But we can't adopt bad non-functional standards. My view on the measurement thing, and Tech Lab is involved in measurement, right?
Yeah, you'll hear more about open measurement later too.
I think that the major OTT providers, Sling, Hulu, YouTube TV, DirecTV Now, Roku Channel, Tubi TV, I think they should file the data into a third party that lockboxes it and anonymizes it and creates a rating standard off of that. Now, I said this at a former IAB event, and there are a lot of people feel strongly about third-party measurement. None of those people have ever been a publisher or a media company, right? The likelihood of what I described involving fraud or inaccuracy is virtually zero. There is no way these tier one companies are going to mess up syndicating their data into a lockbox. And that risk is significantly lower than the inaccuracies and the measurement gaps of Nielsen and ComScore. That's the solution.
Interesting. I think, certainly, open measurement, I don't know if you're particularly familiar with it, but it is initially focused more on viewability, but it is very much collecting the signal, a signal for viewability that then the different verification vendors can all tap into, which I think gets a little bit at your point about kind of lockbox.
Problem is that none of this stuff works. The stock market is a really good indicator of whether stuff is real or not. The reason why all these ad tech companies have their stock so far down is because none of this stuff works. Anyone who's ever tried to implement any of these viewability technologies or what have you, they work half the time. And then the problem is if the data comes back bad, the advertiser is upset. If the data comes back good, the advertiser doesn't believe it. That's always and I've gone through this. I TA'd statistics at Columbia Business School. I'm good at statistics. Although the question is, would someone who's good at statistics say they're good at statistics? Exactly. When the studies come back sometimes from the Millard Browns and stuff like that, I know right away when I look at the sample sizes and I see what they did, and it's usually when it comes back with a bad result, because again, if it comes back with a good result, the client doesn't believe it. And I'm like, there's data contamination. When did you, it's not possible. Certain things where the exposed is higher than the control, it's not possible, right? And then they're like, well, it was there was a problem with when it was in the field, So this is my struggle. In the ivory tower of standard setting, it would be great. And then in the practical reality of it, it's always just heartache.
That's a hard comment to follow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think what we strive to do, and hopefully what we'll really get into today, is with Tech Lab, it's all about the technical standards, right? The foundational capabilities that can make all of these different pieces work better together. Plenty of work to be done there. I think it's been great having you and painting a very vivid picture of the opportunities I think we all have in working together.
Yeah, and I would just conclude with that if the stuff works, people will buy it off the shelf and readily adopt it. The problem is the people in my seat who are very confined in terms of the number of resources are increasingly being asked to adopt things which are semi-functional. And that's not good for us. It's not good for the advertiser. And we don't have the resources to do that, you know?
No, we are working on it, and collectively with everyone in the room working on it. So thank you again. Really appreciate you being here.
Okay.
Thanks.